Hi, I'm Nanditi. This picture of my laptop is my autobiography. One arc of my journey goes from being a big tech product manager to arts organizer and live coding musician. It's driven by a lifelong habit of learning sideways and not following the syllabus. This way of learning led me to co-found Ajaibghar. It is a creative technology studio where community play and culturally rooted tech art come together. I'm going to share with you today how I use creative coding and sound art across different cultural contexts, not as tools, but as practices. I'm not interested in consuming art, I'm interested in feeling it, and sound for me is central to how art becomes experiential. Sound is how I think about place, memory, and culture. It bypasses explaining and goes straight to experience. So everything that you sing next is built from listening, whether there's performance or games, or design or workshops. My grounding comes from working with grassroots folk arts in Rajasthan. Before creative technology, I learned by listening to musicians, communities, and lived traditions. Here's a project where these two worlds meet. This is live coding sound design for a contemporary folk musical theatre called Main Jo Karti Wo Kyun Karti. And I've trained in Hindustani classical music since my early years. It taught me structure, recursion, and improvisation. So when I began coding, it felt like a natural extension and not a departure. Past Lives is my track on Algorave India Compilation One. That is an album of algorithmic music from the Indian diaspora. My track blends rap darbari with ambient electronics shaped by memory, place, and code. Alongside the album, we also created generative zines as a publishing format. Each zine translates the track's sound, process, and story into visuals, written with code, not just design tools. And the zines were an initiative of code.drift collective community, which I'll come to next. Code.drift is our ongoing community practice. We drift through cities, we listen together, then we code and perform in audio-visual pairs. It always starts with wondering, code comes later. This practice entered design context through a year-long fellowship with Godrej Design Lab, exploring creative coding as an Indian design language and expanding Code.drift into Code Yatra, which was a creative log journey across Indian cities. We turned the Code.drift into a game, making creative coding playful, shared, and non-intimidating. Learning code, music, and visuals happens naturally through play and city exploration. We just did a gameplay of this like 2 days back here at Sandbox. And some of those guys are here also. I also design workshops where sound becomes a way to map space, memory, and archives. These are practices where listening itself is a creative act. Friendship, play, and trust are core infrastructures in how we work. Some of our strongest practices grew from coding together in groups, in parks, and online, especially during the pandemic. We use open source coding tools, and they don't just change how we build, they shape open communities where knowledge is shared and nobody works alone. Some tech art feels magical, some is quietly emotional. The web can hold both. At Ajaibghar, many of our exhibitions and installations live inside something as ordinary as a browser. Even Contagion, a science gallery, was an exhibition that we designed and developed during the pandemic, which was absolutely online. Code can be performed too. Live coding opens the black box. The audience sees the process, the errors, the recovery live. Performance becomes shared and people root for the actual making. Code can collaborate with bodies, movement, and theater, becoming a part of live embodied performance. Here's a clowning performance by our friend and collaborator Nano Bakana during Code Yatra, shaped by the ghats of Ajaibghar and live coding. Museums are the origin of Ajaibghar's work and practice. We believe they are places of listening, making, and experimentation, not just display. They don't just hold culture, they help culture happen. This isn't project-based work for me. It is a long-term cultural inquiry, returning to the same questions across different forms, contexts, and collaborations. What would it mean to design technology with care, context, and culture?